Amerika her ne kadar özgürlükler ülkesi olarak adlandırılsa da aslında esaretin ülkesidir. İnsanların farkında olmasalar da paraya, maddeye ya da kendi benliklerine ve hırslarına taptığı bir ülke. Ahlaki tahribatın sosyal yapıyı neredeyse tamamen altüst ettiği Amerika'da, her yıl yüzlerce insan bu çöküşü fark ederek çareyi İslamiyet'i seçmekte bulur.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Faulkner. I was born Rochelle Renee Faulkner. When I converted, I changed my name to Jana Yasmina. I was born in the city of Chicago, the South Side, the projects called Robert Taylor Home. It was kind of gritty and grimy, but it was about 10 blocks from Wrigley Field, a famous baseball arena. And my parents were born in, my father, he was born in Memphis, Tennessee. And my mother was born in Crowder, Mississippi. They're both from the South. They're children of the Northern Migration. They're Christian. They both were raised Christian, Southern Baptist in particular. And they went to church their whole life. When they became adults, they really didn't go to church. But it was still a big influence. Like the Christian Southern Baptist religion was still a big influence in our home. So that's all we knew, Jesus and, his disciples. That's how I was raised. The most times we went to church was during like the big holidays, Christmas, Easter. That's when I went. I went to Sunday school. I was in the youth choir. But the kids, my brothers and sisters, we went. My parents didn't really go with us, but they did make us go. So Christianity was, like I said, a big influence on my family. My grandmother, my father's mother, was a missionary. My sister, her father, his parents were ministers, and they had their own church in the basement. So when we would go over there, that's what we would do. We would go to their basement and they would conduct service, and that's what we would do like every other Sunday when we would go visit her grandparents. So they were like ministers. And that's how I remember my childhood as far as religion. It wasn't like a big, like I wasn't like in the church, like someone like consistently, like every day, but it was a big influence on our life. Like, I listened to gospel music every Sunday. We listened to gospel music every Sunday. And it wasn't until I moved to California with my father, I moved here, my father would wake me up and I would have to read the Bible. Like, that was what I did. That was my homework. Read the Bible every day. And so that's the kind of impact church had on me. I started out school in Chicago, kindergarten, I believe. My first school was called Crispus Attucks, and I went there for kindergarten. It was horrible, but I was a kid. I would hold on to the pole and I wouldn't want to go. It was bad. And then I went to, it was a school called Edward Hartigan. I went to that school. It was nice. It was a good school. That was also in Chicago. It was, I don't know, I had good teachers. I met a lot of friends there that I talk to today. And it was really nice. I went there until I was in the 4th grade, until I was 9 years old, which is the 4th grade. Then that year I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's another state. I moved to Wisconsin and I started attending a school called Granville, and it wasn't really diverse. My sisters and brother, we were the few blacks that went to that school. So, and it was in the suburbs, and it was like, way out. So, I liked it. It was something different than I was used to in Chicago because of the setup of the school. It was like a big, what they call pods, and the classes were separated by chalkboards. That's how they separated the class. It was very few classes that was enclosed. So, but it was fun. I had my first job there. I would work, I would sell pens and paper and, school supplies. It was kind of a tough period because I was living with my sister and her husband, and I was taking care of them because my sister was having a lot of issues. So I was taking care of my nephews, and I would have to go to school. I would take care of them, and I would have to go to school. And there they send you to your next grade after the 5th grade. After the 5th grade, you go to another school. So their grades went up to the 5th. And I had to take a lot of tests. I had to write a book, and I wrote the book. I won. I remember winning the book contest. And but I had to do all of this, missing school like at least twice a week. I had to accomplish that, and I did. But it was kind of rough. It was a rough time. My mom and I were like really getting along, so I moved to California, which is how I came to California. My 10th grade year, when I was 15, I moved to California, and my father homeschooled me, which is why I would read the Bible every morning. He homeschooled me for about 3 months, and we were staying with my aunt in South Central, and it was a culture shock because when you come to California, it's very, very diverse. In Wisconsin, it's not like that. It's either black, white, few Hispanics. So it was really a culture shock coming here. And I was in South Central, which is what I saw on television, and it was like 5 or 6 months after the riot, so I was like thinking about that. And so I was kind of nervous. And my father, he wouldn't put me in school because of that reason, because he didn't like the area. So that's why he homeschooled me. And I moved to Hawthorne, which is how I ended up at Lusinger. That's where I went to school until like the 12th grade. And I left, I became pregnant, I moved out, I got my GED, and I've been on my own since I was 17. So I've never really worked. But I have had jobs, like odd jobs here and there. My first job on my own was when I was at McDonald's. But that was in another city in Wisconsin when I moved back to Wisconsin. And I worked there during the winter time. And it's cold. And I don't miss the winter at all. I had to walk in snow. And it's cold. So that's what I remember the most about it. Being in the snow, catching the bus, and working for a year. I don't miss that. And then after that, I worked at, I came to Memphis. I worked for a cleaning company for FedEx. I worked there for about a year. And then I got a job as the job I applied for, I ended up getting as a general assistant, administrative assistant. Worked that for like 6 months. And I left and I moved back to California. And I stayed with my friend for a few months, and that was it. Well, before I converted, the only thing I knew about Islam was what I saw from the Nation of Islam. They were a little bit angry. So that was my impression, what the Nation of It, which Malcolm X was a part of. So that was my impression. They were like angry and mad about life, and I didn't know that was just a sect of Islam. And when you grow up in the Midwest, you do run into a lot of Muslims, particularly Arab Muslims. So it wasn't a good impression. not because they were, I don't know, it's just it was mostly men I came in contact with, and they just came off, can I say it? Can I say what it was? As a little bit aggressive towards women. So that was my impression of them, kind of always aggressive, like always trying to talk to me. And I was like 11 years old, so I didn't understand that. As a kid, I just knew I was afraid to like go to their stores. So that was my impression of Muslim men. Muslim women, I just thought they were quiet, couldn't talk, had no voice. That was my impression. Clothed, no voice, man dominate. That was. How I became Muslim, I moved to Tennessee, and I met this Egyptian who worked at a store. I think he was Sudanese though. And there was a program on that was talking about Islam. I think about the war in particular. And I was saying, I don't understand, like, why someone doesn't say something about, the angry Muslims. And he made a comment like, what do you want someone to say about an angry Muslim? Like, what do you say about Christians? And I was like, but we're not blowing up stuff. That's how I felt at the time. I'm like, we're not blowing up things, and what should I say? I have nothing to say. It just seems like you're angry for nothing. And he was just like, go educate yourself. And so that's what I started to do. Educate myself, get to know a little bit more about the religion. The more when you read it, and the more you kind of see it. I'm more of a visual person, to actually see the words being put to action. Like the praying is so different when you pray. You can, in Christianity, in particular Southern Baptist, you're not supposed to ask God for what you want. You're not supposed to pray for yourself. You're supposed to pray for others, and good health. That's about it. But you can't ask him for something tangible. You can't ask him for that. It's just not a no-no. But here you feel like, at least I felt like I was closer to God. Every time I pray, that's how I feel. I feel closer to him, and it's just a humbling experience to get on your knees And to do that 5 times a day is just humbling to me. It's just a very wonderful experience. And, you know, I can't really put it into words, but I just feel closer to him. I feel like a personal relationship with him, with Allah. I took the Shahada last year on my birthday during Ramadan, which is one of the biggest reasons why I became Muslim. It was a big influence on me. My father stopped speaking to me for a month. He felt like I was spitting on his mother's grave. So my sisters, they were just wondering, because they were just wondering if it was just something I was doing again, like if it was something new and interesting that I just wanted to do, and they thought it would pass, like it was a fad. I don't know if it wasn't real. They just thought it was something I wanted to do for now, and maybe I'll get over it. That's how my mother and my sister were, but they were still supportive, because my sister's best friend is Muslim. Her best friend is Muslim for like 20 years. But and my brother, also when I was in Memphis, I went to a mosque. I wanted to speak to someone, and I met the sheikh, but I didn't tell my brother that was where I was going, because he is Christian. He attends church. He's heavily influenced by his Christianity. After I took him from there, we left, he was like really upset, and he was angry that I took him to a mosque. And he was just like, you know, next time just tell me. But I knew he wouldn't take me if I told him where I was going. So it was a negative reaction at first. And but my brother is like coming around. My father was speaking, but he thinks I don't know. He thinks like I'm being brainwashed. Sometimes he thinks that, like, but he knows I'm an independent thinker. He knows that about me, and I try to remind him that, you know, that we're like really, really close. And so anything I do that's outside of his box, he's like, why are you doing that? But we speak. We don't really talk about religion. We used to, but we don't now. So everybody else has been real supportive. My friends especially have been really supportive. If I did convert, I wanted to know what a woman's world was, because the picture that I spoke of before was, you know, submissive and oppressed. That's the image that I saw. But maybe it's just here. It's just the women are so independent and, you know, so free thinking, and, you know, they're still supportive of their husbands, and, you know, of the men in their life. They're still supportive as a woman, but they also have their own personality. They have their own, you know, independence, their own free thinking, their own free will, which is, you know, what I love. So that really changed a lot, my impression of women in Islam. That was my biggest, you know, which I'm happy that it. Well, when I decided to convert, it was during Ramadan. And I started fasting on my own before I met them. Just, you know, so I'm like on the right track with the fasting. So the sacrifice for Allah and for the people, and to understand their suffering, and that was like the most beautiful thing to me, because in Christianity, yes, there's Lent, but we don't really talk about, you know, we don't really talk about Lent. We don't really talk about the sacrifice, the fasting that we're actually supposed to do, and that the Bible says. We don't really talk about it. We don't do it. You know, some may, but really don't. You know, it's especially in America. Other countries, they are really, you know, Christian bound, but in America, it's not like that. It's, you know, it really is. It's your choice. What do you want to do? And, you know, it's a cultural thing. Yeah, it's a cultural thing, you know, in America. You know, because you know, it's freedom of religion, which means freedom to practice it. And if no one's practicing it, then you're not really going to do it. You know, so that was, Ramadan was the biggest change in my life. Before I converted, I was traveling. I drove from Wisconsin to California with my nephew. And I saw like the most horrific accident ever. Like someone crashed and I saw them eject. That's what made me get serious. And I said, I'm doing it. You know, now or never. That's how it was for me. And then when I came here, it was just like, everything was like going. It was just like, you know, when it slowed down, it was like a shock to me because, you know, so much is happening during Ramadan. And when I came here, it was just like so much excitement. So, you know, can I help you? Do you need? It was just the most welcoming experience ever. I think if anyone can convert, it should be during Ramadan because that's when people are at their most pious and, you know, they're the most giving during that time. So. As an American, I think that, you know, I think they should be able to we should be there to help, only to help and assist them in whatever they want their vision of their world to be. You know, not to change, not to try to make them into a replica of America. I don't want to see that. The problems I see are, I guess, you know, the more I've been in Islam, I guess it's more so a cultural thing, to where people, their culture influence the way they present Islam, which makes it look bad sometimes. And, you know, it's so that's the problem I see, and no one really speaks. It seems like it appears, maybe it's just here, that no one feels like they can say their honest opinion about. Like they feel like if they say something bad about what's happening in the Islamic world, that they're speaking bad about Islam and not about those people or that individual who's running the country. So that's why I feel like people should speak up and speak out and say more about the love in Islam and talk about the good things about Islam, and that it is bad to suppress a woman and oppress a woman, that it's not good to not give people their human basic rights. So I think that's the problem, and the solution is to speak up more.